The time is 6:46 p.m. I call this meeting to order. I invite Braden Lovey to the podium to deliver land recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I begin this land acknowledgement, I did just want to begin with a brief reflection on the Haudenosaunee teaching known as the Seven Generations teaching. This is a teaching that dictates that decisions made today should ensure a sustainable world for 7 generations into the future. It emphasizes that current actions impact people far beyond us, and that any decision we make should be made in light of this timeline. So I just want to give a brief thought to Council that as though we near the end of our terms and the end of our year, that we are still committed to building a better future for students at Western, and that we should be working in light and in committee of the 7 generations teaching to be able to say that we want to build a better Western and a better future for our students 7 generations down the line. With that said, we acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wauk, and Chonatan nations, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous populations, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of this land and vital contributors of our society. Thank you.
Councilors, please head over to Echo 360 to log your attendance. Councilors, we're 4 away from quorum, but I know we have quorum in attendance, so please log into your Echo 360s now. If you're having any trouble with your Echo 360, please raise your placard. Councilor Bose. Councilor Thompson. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Today is a one-part meeting. On today's agenda, we have the Board of Directors report from Grace, a student experience presentation by Jacob Clark, the executive reports. Following that, we have the motion to approve executive reports, the motion to approve the updated strategic plan, the motion to approve minor administrative amendments to the bus pass policy, the motion to reaffirm USC advocacy for divestment and human rights in Western's responsible investing policy, the motion to endorse the accessibility position paper draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities, the motion to approve federal budget recommendations, and the motion to endorse the teaching, learning, and assessment draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities. For the last three motions I mentioned, those items were received by Standing Committee or ACUSC and approved by majority vote in the Standing Committee or ACUSC to proceed to Council for consideration. Can I get a mover to approve today's agenda, please? Councillor Lovey. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Thompson. Are there any questions regarding today's agenda? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. We do need to make sure all of you vote because we have one more person than quorum here today. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the approval of the minutes, can I get a mover to approve the March General Meeting minutes? Councillor Abedi. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Bose. Are there any questions regarding the minutes? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? And are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. First off, kind of reiterating on what I said at the council dinner, this year I've had the privilege to have a unique perspective on all of you. I've seen the long meetings, debates, and amendments, but also the effort, the care, and the time you all put in behind the scenes for the USC and for our students. At the end of the day, what you all do matters, and I'm very grateful to have chaired the meetings this year. I want to give a special shout out to Isabella for all the work she's done behind the scenes that you may not see. Let's give her a round of applause. And I want to give a special shout out to Dane for all the guidance and last minute meetings I've scheduled throughout the year. Let's give her a round of applause. After today's meeting, we have our annual general meeting on May the 6th. It will be virtual, and attendance is mandatory for you all. I will email you about the time of the meeting after ACUSC. Standing committees will not meet before the AGM, but ACUSC will. I wish you all the best on the rest of your exams and future endeavors. Have a great summer, and let's get started. I invite Grace Wu, the chair of the board of directors, to the podium to deliver the board of directors report.
Hi guys, hope you guys have been having a good final season and enjoying the good weather today. Like you guys, the board had our last board meeting today, so it's very wholesome, very bittersweet that it's all coming to an end. I would like to talk about three big things that the board has looked at over the past month. To start off, last month, the board received an investment update from our financial advisors at TD, where we reviewed the USC's investment account structure, how it's broken down into different time horizons and different asset allocations. investment performance is strong and growing as expected, so there's nothing new to be noted there. Today, during our board meeting, we reviewed our elections governance board and an update to our code. For context, this year we established a new elections governance board and updated the new elections code to respond better to elections violations and triaging those accordingly. So we brought on a new principal investigator, John McNair, as well as a new elections governance board with 6 students, I believe, 5 or 6 students. And John came in today to share some findings and a summary of how that worked out. And in his words, he said it was like 2 or 3 times during the meeting, they had an unequivocally successful election cycle, so that is really great to hear. They received substantially fewer complaints than last year, and he attributed that success to the new all candidates meeting that all candidates were, it was mandatory for them to attend, and there was a lot of education on how to run your campaign and things like that. What else? Yeah, so we're gonna, because of the success of this new board, this will be happening again next year, and then we'll collect more feedback to see if there's any high-level changes that we want to make for the future. And then also this board cycle, we looked at the COO, so Chief Operating Officer, end of year performance appraisal. For context, the board oversees and employs the Chief Operating Officer, Jeff Armour. And the last performance appraisal for the mid-year was done in January. So we reviewed his accomplishments over the past terms and outlined some future goals as normal. And Jeff continues to outperform in his role, and there are no concerns that were flagged. I'll just leave it at that. That's all I had in my notes. Are there any questions?
If you have any questions, please raise your placard. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, everyone.
I invite Jacob Clark, I'm not going to read it. The experiential learning coordinator, to the podium to deliver the student experience presentation.
All right, thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely to see so many familiar faces around the room as well. Oh, wow. But also so great to meet some of you for the first time. My name is Jacob. I'm the Experiential Learning Coordinator of Co-Curricular Programs here at Western University. I'm located in Careers and Experience, so just down the hall from here, and I work as part of the broader student experience here at Western. I'm here to present today on the redesign and relaunch that we've done of the co-curricular record to take in to account the feedback that we've been receiving about the record for a while now from across campus with our main partners from the faculty side, the staff side, and the student perspective as well. So I'm excited to share what we've been rolling out and what's to come with this so that it's a more usable tool for everybody on campus. And again, thank you so much for having me today. I have a few slides. It should only be about 10-ish minutes or so. And if we have some time for questions at the end, I'm more than happy to answer. So a little bit about the rationale behind where these changes have come is we are really in a place in our world right now where we're really focused on, and we've heard from students as well, of wanting to make sure our students are graduating equipped with those career readiness skills. So that your time here at Western is valuable for many reasons, and you're also building up those transferable skills for whatever is next for you after you graduate. And with that, we examined across how our structures flow, and we recognized that there is a large proportion of experiences here are what we call co-curricular. So those outside the classroom activities that are not for course credit. So we think of all the different student leadership opportunities, the resident staff roles on campus, clubs, athletics. There's so many different things that we can be naming. And ensure that those avenues for students and the skills you're gaining, those are clear. We are also, as a campus, really dedicated and have a goal of all students graduating with a experiential learning opportunity, and we see those outside the classroom opportunities as a great to be doing that experiential learning. Our record and where we wanted to take things and what I'll be sharing today kind of positions Western's co-curricular record in a new way within the broader Canadian context, and we're hoping that that in the future is going to position us for some sector leadership as well. So all that really culminated together through honestly multiple years of consultation and implementation into what the record now looks like today. And our new approach really that our Western Co-Curricular Records tagline is to turn your campus experience into career impact. So we came to this focus on career readiness skills and adopting the Conference Board of Canada's employability skills to be connected in with every co-curricular experience that is eligible on the co-curricular record. So essentially what that means is that any opportunity that is co-curricular record approved, not only is it run by a Western faculty or staff member and verified that way by the university, but we're also guaranteeing that it's like, yep, you are gaining those skills throughout the course of that program. These consultations, honestly, they started before I even started in this role. They started back in 2023. Some of the folks might be familiar. I was working in housing with some of you actually at that time when this was happening. And when I came over to student experience, a big part of the role then was putting all this into place and getting this redesign to happen. And really what they're ultimately, it's led to the strengthening enhancement of our co-curricular record, which I'll review some of our new capabilities and the impact that that's going to have on our campus. So those new capabilities can be summarized as being able to capture all forms of student experience with the emphasis on what we call the signature types of experiential learning here on campus. This is kind of a little bit more in-house, but Western really prioritizes 5 types of experiential learning, that being education abroad, research, project-based learning, entrepreneurship, and work-integrated learning, so that's like co-ops and internships. And now we're able to actually track and see like what programs and help support those programs that are connected to those things here at Western. We are also then able to figure out exactly not just those 5 types, but all the different types of experiential learning that are happening outside the classroom, as well as be able to map and see how many of those experiences are what we call high intensity. So what this really means in a lot of ways is about the number of hours or time commitment across these different opportunities, recognizing that not all opportunities on campus require the same amount of hours. Some things may be a day, some things might be a year. And we're wanting to make sure that we're tracking those. And again, all this is to advance to then that goal of our signature experience strategy and our experiential learning priorities so that all students are graduating with what we call high intensity experiential learning opportunities. Some people might be getting that in coursework, some people might be getting that in co-op and internship, some people might be getting that as a residence don, or some people might be getting that as part of the USC. So we're really wanting to like get a better understanding of what the full student experience looks like, and also give credit where credit is due to these student opportunities. I can speak for myself that these were the roles that were really transformative in my undergraduate career. So I think we can all agree that there's a ton of value in what's happening outside the classroom. And then ultimately students can then plan their pathways for that success. So I mentioned before the Conference Board of Canada and the employability skills. So there are 16 different employability skills that the Conference Board of Canada says, yep, here in Canada, these are the skills that we need, that are transferable skills across industries, so that when we're seeing that people have those skills, they're going to be successful in the workplace and in their career. We wanted to go with a like externally researched and validated competency framework as opposed to an in-house system like how some other universities use. And that is so that there's a shared language between what we're doing here at Western and potential employers. So our employee relations unit is is also working with our key recruiters and key partners to say, hey, if you are seeing students with a co-curricular record and it's saying that they have really great communication skills, we can verify that that is true. We have worked with the faculty and staff to make sure that they're identifying these skills and helping the people or the students in those programs gain those skills. So it adds credibility for you all as well when you're adding these things to your resume, or if you're adding your co-curricular record as a supplemental document for an award or a grad school application, or additional documents in even sometimes job applications there as well. It gives that extra weight, and then we're also working then to build that trust in Western that hey, our leadership programs are some of the very, very best, and look at the skills that our students are gaining. So this is an early snapshot of what the programs that we currently have in the system are gaining. We'll see that communication skills, and that's no surprise, is by far the largest skill that our students are gaining, which is also great. We're humans are social creatures, so the fact that we're gaining communication skills is definitely a positive. You will, if you've been paying attention to how many positions are in the co-curricular record over the past few years, I don't imagine anyone was other than me, but what you may have seen is a reduction in the overall number of positions that are eligible in the record, and that is because we have added a time requirement to be at minimum for things that are eligible for the record. So there is a minimum of 10 hours that a position needs to have active student participation in order to be eligible, which meant that there had been some things that are no longer than eligible. So a one-off workshop, for example, is not eligible for the co-curricular record. But I know our faculties across campus and other departments have been, just say, for example, bundling together workshops so that it meets that threshold. And the rationale behind that is when we think about those competencies and we think about experiential learning as a whole, learning takes time. For those of you who might be really interested in education, you might be aware of Cold's experiential learning cycle, which basically there's different parts of learning where you actually have to learn the skills, practice and apply them, reflect on it. All that needs to happen, and you need a meaningful amount of time then to actually then develop those skills that we're saying that students are developing, which then adds that credibility and weight again to those then positions. This is just a little bit of a breakdown of where we're seeing a bunch of our activities currently. So for some co-curricular record jargon, the activity is the overall program, and then the positions are then the roles within the program itself. So at the activity level, we're seeing a breakdown of, honestly, a huge investment in clubs and associations, student leadership, student government, volunteerism, all the amazing things that the USC really leads in a lot of ways, as well as our partners across campus, as a large portion of the opportunities that are available for our students. And I work with everyone on campus, so the USC, different departments on campus, different faculties, as they're continuing to build out new roles, to continue to get those in the record so that they're verified, continue to move the needle on the level of experiential learning that you're actually gaining outside the classroom. And then that means ultimately the skills that you're then gaining, so that then hopefully when you graduate and you're talking to an employer, you're going to be like, I have amazing communication skills. I have amazing problem-solving skills, not just because of what I learned in the classroom, but because of what I learned outside the classroom as well. And that's kind of where you all come in as well. I just wanted to thank you all for inviting me in today. It's just really great to see just such a dedicated group of student leaders who are looking for creating such positive change here on campus, and it's really because of you all that there's just such a vibrancy that we have here at Western. So this is my ask, is that as you're continuing to promote things and you're continuing to have influence in your spaces to promote the CCR, to increase that student awareness, to share any activities that you are seeing that, I'll just say, if you log into the record and you are seeing, for example, that you're like, oh, I participated in this thing, but I'm not seeing it on there. Reach out to me. There's always programs growing and changing on campus, and if it meets that criteria, we would love to figure out how to get those into the system. We have some folks here as part of, and our steering committee as well, so that there's always student voice guiding these conversations. Continue to amplify the importance of these throughout your different roles and throughout your different, your different circles of influence on campus. And if there's any groups that you're a part of that would be helpful for me to come and speak with, I'd be more than happy to. Really, those, like, if we think back to those roles, it's like, really, that's just the beginning. Ever since we launched stuff, you may have seen on campus, we had some billboards and some signs and stuff towards the end of March. It's like we've only grown past that. I think the number was like 468, and I'm like, oh, like today we passed 500. Like, it's continuing to grow, and that's exactly what we want. We're seeing a lot of uptake in value in this, and I hope you all are too. Thank you again so much for having me. I'm open to any questions that folks may have. I know you might be on a tight schedule as well, so if you do have any questions for me, you can always just reach out to wccr@uw.ca. If you have any questions programmatically or individually about your record as well, it's a one-stop shop for anything connected to there. It goes directly to me, and I'd be more than happy to chat and meet with anybody. So thank you. Yeah.
If you have any questions, please raise your placard.
Yes. Yep. So with our affiliates, we're connected in with Kings. So all the Kings council positions and their associated roles are on there. It is part of our continued outreach, though, because we've worked more with the department that's equivalent to ours at Kings. And this then really is a call, and exactly why we wanted to be in front of students as well, is to start kind of getting some of those student-run avenues for communication too. So if folks have any potential suggestions on leads on who might be interested in learning about these things, I would love to chat with them as well, to get those conversations opened up.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Lovey?
Just to follow up to my initial statement there, coming from the perspective of somebody in the affiliate councils, how do we bring those positions to your desk?
Yes.
How do we make sure that those, like, with new developments, new club positions, new developments across councils, how quickly can we get those to the WCCR?
Yeah, so I would say email me at wccr@uw.ca, and then our main contact over at Kings, at least, is Heather Donnelly. And essentially all roles on the record need to be verified or with a Western faculty or staff, or in the USC's case, we work with Desiree and Sherry as like continued staff members, just so that there's that year-over-year like engagement. But what we do often is that students will be the ones to say like, hey, like this position has become available. This is something that we're working on, and it's like, because you're in those roles, and then we say, okay, let's find the appropriate staff or faculty who's connected in with that and make this happen as a collaborative process. So it might depend on when we get then those communications. I've seen turnarounds be as quick as a week. I've seen some take a semester. Really depends on people's capacity. But if there's things that you have in mind, please reach out and we can definitely book something.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Jacob.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Moving on to the April executive reports. I invite President Henriquez to the podium to deliver her executive report.
Hi, everyone. Happy last in-person council. Thanks for being okay with the 15-minute delay. There was a bit of an incident outside with some geese and Weldon, but me and a couple of the councilors were down there just helping out some folks, chatting, and I haven't gotten an update from special constables or FM yet, but the USC's building services manager is on it, and if we hear more about the geese, we'll let you know, I guess. One of them is using a blanket from my office, so hopefully, she's doing well. I'm really hopeful for her, but okay, yeah. There's a lot and there's not a lot. Like, I would say there's more content probably in the for action section than in the actual reports, but I'll just kind of talk about my top 3 highlights. Late night breakfast is always a big one for me. I went this year on my birthday, which was kind of fun, and just kind of getting out of the office and getting to be with students in a super stressful time and just like hang out, learn about their exams. I see a couple folks in the gallery that I saw at late night breakfast, which was kind of fun. So glad that you're here. But it's always a fun one, and it's a good reminder of the work that we do for students. I know Grace is here from the board, and every month at the board meeting we do something called the USC Mission Moment, where either myself or the COO will kind of share something that we've experienced over the last month that just kind of reflects the work that we do at the USC and why we do it. And this month's was late night breakfast, because I think it's just such a big example. There'll be tons of students who come through that space that may not know that that's an event that the USC puts on, but it's important that we do it nonetheless to kind of support the academic experience here at Western. Council Gala was super fun. I know it was kind of a busy time to host it, but shout out to Armand and Isabella. You guys did a great job planning it, and it was really fun to see some folks in a non-council setting. And then Transition with Steve has been a great part of, I was going to say April, but I feel like it's been going on since like you got elected. So Steve is finishing up his placement, so then soon he'll be in the office full time, which is really exciting. But just passing on kind of all of the key files that we've worked on this year, any of the big agreements that are coming up, some of the long-term stuff. And there's a lot of different moving pieces between the executive and the staff and the board and the council and students at large and all the Western committees and stuff. So it's transition is kind of also like a reflection on like all the things that you did. So it allows you to get your head out of the, they say it's like drinking from a fire hose. Like you remove yourself from the fire hose for a second to kind of reflect on what the year's been like. And then my Ask Me About is Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I saw a production of it, and it is a wild show. Like, just bizarre. And, like, I didn't go into it, like, knowing what was going to happen. Like, I didn't look up the soundtrack, and there's, like, country music in it. It's very, Ariana's laughing. I feel like she's watched it before, but it's an odd one. But ask me about that if you want. In terms of updates, we did final committee meetings and ACOSC, although I guess I should add an addendum that there's one more ACOSC before AGM, but I made it to all the council meetings this cycle. It was really great to see all the great work that you guys do. I get to see it at GNF all the time, but it was one of my first times seeing it at UA and EA, so shout out to you folks in those committees. I know the counselors are working really hard. Bias in hiring training, that is something that came from the USC's EDI committee, so that is a committee that comprises counselors, executive staff, full-time student leaders, part-time student leaders, and our board of directors, and that's a group that essentially comes together to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And one of the things that was brought forward through that is kind of like a combination of a platform point and some of the work that some of the students on that committee wanted to do was a bias in hiring training, talking about how to address bias in hiring, talking about how to acknowledge it. We are all on a campus, and while Western can feel really big, it's also really small, so people are often interviewing folks they know and things like that. And so how to navigate that at a faculty council level, staffing level, executive level, coordinators, AVPs, and the board as well. So that was a really, really fun one. The board governor's property and finance meeting was Tuesday. So I know we talked about this a little bit. By a little bit, I mean a lot of it. I feel like every meeting since January has been budget, I want to say. But as we were walking through those steps, like once we get director's approval and council's final approval, it is released kind of from the USC system and enters the Western ecosystem. So there's kind of a two-step process with that. We submit our reports or our proposed budgets to IPB, or Institutional Planning and Budgeting, and then I give a presentation, and Steve will give it next year. The president gives a presentation at the Board of Governors Property and Finance Subcommittee. So the way that the legal all squares away is because Western collects and remits our fees, so they're the body that like gets all the student fees. It hits their bank account for a second, and then they send it over to us on anything that's on our fee bill. We have to get any fees, increases, changes, things like that approved by those folks. So it went super, super well. So now the final step is the April 30th Board of Governors meeting, and that's where they'll approve the fees for not only ourselves, but other student organizations on campus like the MBAAs, SOGs and the HBAAs. And finally, a ton of final admin meetings, wrapping up meetings with the president, the vice provost, the VP students, all of the folks in Western Senior Administration that we kind of work with over the year. April is a big transition month in terms of like wrapping up meetings, introducing new folks, kind of setting the stage for the work that Steve and his team will do. So everybody's essentially been meeting with their stakeholders to kind of see what things are like. I won't go into too much more detail just because you'll get so much more from you'll get so much more insight from a bunch of the for action items that we have. So you'll see some stuff is coming up on the federal budgets, the strategic plan, the policy papers, and then obviously we have a council-driven motion, which is always exciting. But in terms of upcoming, it's just like even more transition. Like at this point, the job is really tying up loose ends, handing over the reins to Steve, and really making sure that his team is set up for success. So happy to answer any questions, but if not, it was lovely to see you all in person, and I hope you're surviving exam season.
If you have any questions, please raise your placard.
I think this might be my first one without questions. I'm going to sneak away before someone asks.
Thank you, President Henriquez. I invite Vice President Ejam to the podium to deliver her executive report.
Hello, everyone. So my Ask Me About is Notting Hill. So actually last council meeting, I wasn't here because I was actually in the UK in the real London. And actually, it's funny, the only place that we actually ended up seeing was Notting Hill because every single day of the trip was different family events. And I think that's the first one, UK and seeing family. It was honestly just so nice to be able to see my parents. They came and traveled as well, so we met up with them there. And for those that know, I only really see them twice a year, so it was a nice little cheat third time to get to see them for a week there and be with all of family. So it was honestly so lovely. And honestly, the weather was surprisingly better than it was in Canada. I was shocked. I thought it was going to be raining every day, and it actually ended up being really gorgeous, and it was really nice. The second one I have is Pie Head. It was just really fun. It's actually, I think Omar's going to talk more about it, so I'll let him talk about it. But it's a dinner in Toronto. And yeah, I always love an occasion to dress up, so it was just nice to get to see all friends from other student unions. And especially being there with Sabrine, who's the incoming Vice President University Affairs, was really meaningful because I remember last year being there and it just was really full circle, kind of like wrapping it the year kind of. So that was really nice and definitely a highlight for me. And then yeah, transitioning Sabrine. And I think that's actually in every single section, but that has been a lot of this month. I think a lot of the projects are kind of, for the most part, being wrapped up, and a lot of it is kind of transitioning those projects that are still ongoing, teaching everything that I can and all the wisdom I have and passing it on to her. But yeah, so that's been really amazing, especially with her being actually my current, well, actually not current, she's no longer the current, but she was my AVP this year. So yeah, so some updates, Bidet project update. I don't know how much was explained last time, but there was this initiative that started from actually a group of students, and there was a student, I'll actually give him a shout out, his name was Daniel Sutton, and he did a lot of work behind the scenes. He did a survey, collected testimonials, actually before coming to me and Saud, and it was a really great project that we got to work on, and honestly just shows like the power of student advocacy and that student leadership that he had, and we were able to connect with stakeholders on campus. And yeah, the project pilot is kind of undergoing and it's on its way. Hopefully will be by next term, so we're actually passing that on to the next team. But something that's really exciting and just shows the power of student advocacy. Even if you're not a counselor, even if you're not a senator, even if you're not an executive, there is always change that you can make on campus. So I think that was really meaningful to be able to help him and be a part of that with him. So next one, Berners in Higher Education. I don't know why I put in updates because it's not really my thing, it's more Omar, so I'll let him explain that one. And then yeah, transitioning Sabrine, it's an ongoing all the time. And it's been really amazing. And then lastly, finalize TLA Recs with the UA team. I realize I use a lot of acronyms. So it's the Teaching, Learning, and Assessment recommendations with the University Affairs team. This one has been, over the year, a really amazing and like one I'm passionate about writing as well, especially with the Senate background. And actually, as I mentioned in some of my other reports, we've been also working on the future of teaching and learning strategic plan with the Vice Provost of Academic Programs this year. So kind of doing that work alongside her and alongside like her process has been really helpful, and even to exchange ideas with something that she's also really involved in. And also we expanded the paper a lot this year in terms of adding an artificial intelligence section as well as an academic rights section. So I think that is kind of, or recommendations around those topics. and then upcoming more transitioning with Sabrine, and then the day project comm strategy with the incoming team, kind of figuring out kind of what that communication strategy would look like as we're transitioning the project over to Steve's team. So yeah, is there any questions?
If you have any questions, please raise your placard.
Yes.
Counselor Nadeem.
So it's very much a pilot, and it's not by the USC. It's going to be by Western, but it's very much a pilot, like only a few washrooms to start off with. And we're going to be collecting data. We're created a survey that's going to be in Sol, as well as an educational piece. But yeah, that's kind of the first step. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. I invite Vice President Saeed to the podium to deliver his executive report.
All right. Yeah, so as Jenna mentioned, USA's Partners in Higher Education Dinner, or PIHED, happened on April 15th. She's talked a little bit about it, but basically it's this event that brings sector stakeholders from across the post-secondary education sector together. So a lot of our partners in kind of the college space, our partners from the Confederation of Faculty Associations, people from HECO, which is like kind of like an arm's length government agency, and then as well as some staffers from the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, various MPPs from basically every single party attend the event, and there's like a kind of little speech from the minister. This year was delivered virtually, but that's kind of like the gist of the event, if you're kind of wondering what this PIHED thing is that is on everybody's list. But really just great opportunity to kind of connect with schools across the province and then different people in the post-secondary education sector. And after the event, USA also does a alumni event, which is my number 2 update. So that event brings together steering committee members from USA's past, and it was a really great fun time. Got to see my predecessor Michelle and her predecessor Emily, and introduce them to Stefan, which was really nice. It was kind of like 4 generations of EA there, which is kind of cute. But lots of fun along. Emily was there last year's USC Prez as well. And number 3 has been transitioning Stefan. It's been a really, really fun time getting Stefan into the role. It's kind of really weird, like transitioning your AVP into the role, because he already knows everything, so I don't know what to teach him. But I've been really trying to figure out what he doesn't know yet and make sure that he knows it, but it's going to be a great year next year. In terms of updates, so today you're kind of seeing these first couple. So the federal budget submission, you folks are going to see the recommendations that are going through for that. And once those recommendations are approved by you folks, we'll be sending it out before the 30th. If you're confused and are kind of getting deja vu, yes, you did see the federal budget submission earlier in the year. It probably would have been like September or August meeting. I forget which meeting. The government changed the timeline up on us, so that's why your council gets to approve too. It will be Stefan and Steve that will be like advocating on these points and bringing them forward. So the recommendations were done in consultation with the 2 of them. But yeah, that's why you're getting 2 this year. So I guess consider yourselves lucky. I don't know. The other fun thing was the OLIF presentation. So OLIF is the Ontario Legislative Internship Program. It's a really cool program. Basically, you apply to work there, and they put you in an opposition MPP's office for a couple months where you get to work there, and then they switch you over into a government MPP's office, so you get to kind of see both sides of government. It's a nonpartisan program that's really great, and USA is like one of the sponsors of that program. And we did a presentation for them last Friday, just kind of explaining what USA is, a little bit about the post-secondary education landscape, and then also presenting our advocacy priorities for the year and kind of USA's priorities in general. And then the accessibility policy paper recommendations, which you folks will also be seeing and reviewing today. So hopefully you folks approve those recommendations, but we've been working really hard on that paper this year. Big ups to my team for putting that one together, but really happy with the way that it turned out. And then transition. I don't know if anyone's like playing a drinking game with the word transition, but I would not recommend it, because there's more of it to come in these reports. But yeah, and then my ask me about is applying for a job in this rough job market. I'm currently doing it, and it's bleak out there, folks. But if you don't have a job yet and you're looking for a summer job, Canada Summer Jobs just opened up 2 days ago, and the job bank has quite a few jobs in there. So definitely recommend looking there if you're still looking, but happy to talk. Yeah, any questions?
If you have any questions, please raise your placard. Thank you very much. I invite Vice President Welpley to the podium to deliver her executive report.
Hi everyone. Top big highlights. One of my best friends graduated, so it was really nice to go to the Indigenous graduation ceremony. ISA powwow, she also put it on. She was a co-president, so it was amazing to see all of her hard work pay off. The powwow is so fun. If you guys are here next year, I really suggest checking it out. It happens every year. It's always an annual thing. And then Easter at home, which is why I have asked me about carrot cake. I realized carrot cake takes so long in the oven compared to other cakes, and it was practically raw. So then it was like 9:30 doing a second batch, but it tasted good from what I've heard. Some of my updates. So the orientation budget is it's a budget and a half. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been sifting through all the GLs to create a accurate representation of some of the costs that go into the budget. That way I can set Sophie the next VPOP up for success of understanding some costs that are associated with it. It's a beast to understand. Sarah tried, I'm trying. So it's an ongoing effort to really make sure that we're giving the holistic representation. End of year party at Delilah. So some of you folks were able to attend that. That was super fun. We got to kind of kick off the year and have some amazing people there and celebrate everything that we accomplished. End of year programming. So this has all happened within the last month. So we had Battle of the DJs, which was a massive success. This was an AVP project. We got close to, I think, 15 submissions from DJs, and they were all so talented. It was a lot of fun. We did some puppy yoga, we did craft night, we did a Wayne Hoffman, and then we did wellness boofing in Weldon. So it was nothing short for my portfolio of getting in our last programming efforts, which was really fun. And then it honestly hasn't ended. We have food trucks that have been happening for the past Tuesday, Wednesday, and then tomorrow at 12 o'clock they'll be on Concrete Beach. It's 100 free free ice creams or grilled cheeses for the first 100 people in line. So definitely go check it out if you haven't. And then we're doing some more fun things at the Cove. So I won't get too much into that because it's a bit of a surprise for people, but lots of fun programming to support students in exam season where you're at. We also had LST Social to introduce Sophie to all of the LSTs, so this was a really big passion point for me, making sure that she was having interface with LSTs before they head out into the summer and everything's online. And then we had our CIA dinner, which was awesome. Having one last moment with our coordinators and all the interns being in one space was amazing, and all our AVPs as well. Upcoming transition with Sophie, so as Omar said, it's quite the game at this point. But last programming support. So if you guys have any ideas as well of programming that went well this year, that didn't go so well, I'd love to hear. That way I can help transition Sophie as best as possible.
If you have any questions, please raise your placard. Thank you very much. I invite Vice President Massey to the podium to deliver his executive report.
Hello. So top 3 highlights: went cafe hopping in Toronto with Sabrine. Even though I don't drink coffee, it was cool just to check them out for the vibes. I've been playing squash with the interns, and Reg joined us last week, and she was actually pretty good. And then Jenna and I saw Pippin, was a theater western performance. It was really amazing, but I didn't understand a lick of the plot. And then for my Ask Me About is stuff to do in San Francisco. I'm heading there at the end of next month. Less about ask me about stuff to do there and tell me stuff I can do there, because haven't been yet. But I guess on to my updates. Main thing this month is I've been working on transitioning Habiba into her role, very similar to the other VPs as they've mentioned. It's been a blast so far, and I think she's going to do a really wonderful job next year. I've also been working on wrapping up each coordinator portfolio with any outstanding work on those fronts. Peer Support has been holding study nights each Thursday with free food and refreshments to keep students fueled for their exams and to spread the word that Peer Support is something that goes on for students returning next year. So go stop by tomorrow and get yourself another meal. And then as well, Coat Cycle has been collecting coats at a good rate from deposit boxes around campus. And that leads very naturally into the upcoming, because we're still collecting coats for Coat Cycle and promoting the fact that students can still do so. As well, we're spreading the word that My Virtual Doctor can still be accessed by students during the summer. So even if you're graduating, like many in this room, you still have access to the service until August. Reach is the only other major program still upcoming. It'll be held from May 15th until May 17th, and people from the City of London are coming to check it out as well. City Council recently or the London City Grants program had included REACH in their presentation to City Council, which was an awesome shout out. But I guess that's it for my report. Are there any questions? Oh wait, that's your line.
If you have any questions, please raise your placard. Thank you.
Hold your applause. I also want to shout out Armand. He's been always encouraging other people and singing their praises, but I don't think we've actually recognized him yet at this council. He's been an amazing speaker, keeping council running and keeping the good vibes going. I couldn't imagine somebody better for the job. So round of applause for Armand, because we've been missing it.
Thank you. I invite Vice President Ahmed to the podium to deliver his executive report.
Guys, he stole my line. I was going to give Armand a shout out too. But I guess we can do two. Why not? He's done so much hard work this year. Let's get another round of applause for the lovely Armand Jassal. Absolutely beautiful man sitting up front here. Couldn't ask for a better speaker, definitely. All right, ask me about the Strokes. I got tickets, super excited. They're playing RBC Amphitheater end of June. Been wanted to see them in person. They're dropping a new album. What a wonderful time of year it is. Top 3 highlights, been hitting Barney's a good amount. You know, I'm leaving London, so got to get it in while I can. Rescheduled Connor Gilbert bar crawl. So if you were here last council meeting, you would know about the Connor Gilbert bar crawl. And it's getting moved to Saturday, and I will see Armand there, and I better see all of you out and about Saturday too. Let's have some fun. And then my lovely Montreal Canadiens are in the playoffs. I wrote this when they won Game 1, like literally a day after. I had a ton of my friends from first year, because they're all taking fifth years for some reason, over at my place, and we were watching it together, so it was really great. About like 20 of... Let's not talk about Game 2. Let's just say there are glasses in my house that no longer are glasses that in... It was not a good night last night. But Game 1 was great. Juraj Slavkovsky hat trick. Can't ask for more. About 20-something of us were at my house watching. We did a nice little potluck. It was a really good time. Good to like send off all my friends from Delhi back in the day. So it was a good time. Updates, really short. Transitioning the lovely Azad into his role. Shout out for him for being here. He's like already putting in the extra effort. Good to see that. Go like engage him at some point. You know, that's his job now. So Weldon Street Trolley, so that was pretty fun. It was something that my team, the comms team, and Weldon did together to like bring a trolley around through Weldon. I got to be the goose for one of the days, and it's really hot, and I don't think I've sweat that much in my life, but fun time. I know we talked about the IV cases we're working on, so actually had PBSN reach out to us at one point and talk to us about maybe doing a case comp for next year, so I'm pushing that to Azad next year. But on top of that, we also are working on a 1220 and 2257 case, which I'm happy to say is going swimmingly well. So we had a full meeting between us, our food and bev team, and the 2257 and 1220 profs. So that'll be being done over the next few months and hopefully released for the academic cycle after the next academic cycle. So students can have, so 2 years from now, so students can have as much knowledge about the USC as possible. My goal is just put the USC out there as much as I can, and I think it's a really cool way to do so. Last but not least, relationship transfers, just working with Azad to figure out which relationships I need to focus on transferring to him for the next year. So it's been having like meetings with him and these people at the same time. It's like setting up group chats, conversations, whatever I can do to make sure all these relationships transfer over to him. And upcoming transition, woo! Last meeting, guys, last council reports. How are we feeling? Thank you. But yeah, love you all. This is great. Peace.
If you have any questions, please raise your placard. Councillor Wasti.
Hello. I know that you're an avid texter, so who have you been texting recently?
It's a really interesting question. You've been like in this meeting or in general?
In this meeting.
In this meeting. I think in this meeting so far I've texted, I'm going to be so transparent, I've texted Azad, I've texted Dylan, I've texted Wade, and I've texted Oliver Bose because Oliver and Wade both could not find the agenda. And guess who had it? It was me. I'm the most locked in, obviously, so. Oh, and I texted Armand, obviously, but that's like every day. That's not anything special. Any questions else?
Yeah, that's my line.
Goodbye.
I'm going to motion for a 5-minute recess. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Wasti, are there any objections? We will return at 7:46 p.m. Councilors, we have a new Echo 360 session ID. The session ID is 340868, and it's also on Slack. Moving on to our first motion of the evening, the motion to approve executive reports. The motion reads, be it resolved that council accept the executive reports for April 2026. President Henriquez is the mover. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Graham, are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. Moving on to our second motion, the motion to approve the updated strategic plan. The motion reads, whereas the current strategic plan is outdated and has not been updated since COVID or during the life cycle of current undergraduates on campus. Whereas an outdated strategic plan hinders our ability to make effective long-term investments that serve students in a post-COVID academic environment. Be it resolved that council approve an updated strategic plan for students by students. President Henriquez is the mover. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Turk. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? And are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to cast your vote. The motion passes. Moving on to our third motion, the motion to approve minor administrative amendments to the bus pass policy. The motion reads, whereas the USC regularly reviews its policies and procedures to ensure clarity and consistency, whereas the bus pass policy requires minor administrative updates, be it resolved that council approve the administrative amendments to the bus pass policy as presented. President Henriquez is the mover. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Sanialu. Councillor Sanialu, you're holding Amrita's placard. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Almost got me. Are there any amendments regarding the motion? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. Moving on to our fourth motion, the motion to reaffirm USC advocacy for divestment and human rights in Western's responsible investing policy. The motion reads, whereas Western University maintains a responsible investing policy intended to guide ethical investment practices. Whereas the January 2026 draft and current policy lacks human rights considerations aligned with internationally recognized frameworks and divestment from weapons manufacturers. Whereas a USC-administered student survey conducted during the 2024-2025 academic year demonstrated approximately 90% support for divestment from companies involved in weapons manufacturing and for stronger ethical investment practices. Whereas the 2024-2025 USC passed a motion to advocate to Western University to incorporate human rights considerations and divestment from weapons manufacturers into its investment policy. Whereas the faculties of science, social science, music, arts and humanities, and health sciences, as well as Huron and Kings, have passed parallel motions advocating for the adoption of human rights considerations in the 2025-2026 school year. Whereas over 70 campus clubs, the Society of Graduate Students, CUPE 2361, and UWOFA have publicly called for a divestment and the incorporation of human rights considerations into university investment practices. Whereas Western Senate passed a motion recommending that the Board of Governors incorporate commitments to internationally recognized human rights and international law into Western's investment policy and pursue divestment from weapons manufacturers and companies complicit in human rights violations. Be it resolved that the University Students' Council reaffirms its commitment to advocate for the incorporation of human rights considerations into Western University's investment policies and for the divestment from companies involved in weapons manufacturing and companies complicit in human rights violations. Be it further resolved that the USC communicate these positions to the university administration, the Board of Governors, and any relevant advisory committee involved in the responsible investing policy revision process. Councillor Guman and Nadeem are the movers, and Councillor Khan is the seconder. I'm going to invite Councillor Guman and Nadeem to the podium to speak a bit about their motion. If there's any questions afterwards, we will follow a speaking order where each councillor will get a maximum of 2 opportunities to ask questions. Councillors can ask a second question only once we have gone through our speaking order and everyone has had the chance to speak once. If everyone reaches their maximum amount of speaking rights, voting members on council can motion to extend the question period. If this passes, we will restart the question period with the same rules. These same rules apply for debate period as well. Please ensure question period is only questions and the debate period is debate. I invite Councillor Guman and Nadeem to the podium. And I invite Councillor Khan if she wishes to also come to the podium.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I think it's my first time up here. How exciting.
So the purpose of this motion is to essentially reaffirm our stance. Every 5 years, Western releases the responsible investment policy and it's renewed. And the next time that they're going to be passing this investment policy is at the next Board of Governor meeting. So it's incredibly important that we have a stance as a USC so that whenever there's any conversations, we have something that is kind of backing the things that we say. And that's kind of the purpose of this motion today.
Exactly what Zara said. Also, this motion is nothing new. We've passed it before. It's just reaffirming it so that this year we can say that this year as a council we are continuing our stance. And it's also based on countless or 70 plus student organizations. A lot of the faculties here today have also passed similar motions. It's again just reaffirming our stance.
If you have any questions, please raise your placards.
Do you want us to say it?
You just go backwards. It's like up to you guys.
Do you want to say it?
Yeah.
Councillor Bob Quicks.
Is this on? Perfect. Thank you very much for the motion. As you mentioned before, there was another motion that also kind of agreed to everything that you guys are bringing up now today. I'm just kind of curious as to the reaffirmation aspect regarding the motion itself. Given that we did already take a position on this last year, I'm curious as to whether this is something that we reaffirm every year, or if it's something that we would consider every 5 years, you know, as consideration for the renewed policy of investment that Western provides every 5 years. And yeah, just curious.
Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So essentially, we do have to reaffirm it every year ourselves. Like whether that means that's every 5 years, if we decide to do that. So the one that we had in 2024 to 2025 is expired. I think we talked about this a little bit in the beginning of, or maybe this semester. We talked a little bit more about how kind of it's expired, but some of the university administration is under the impression that it still kind of exists. But it is, in I guess our perspective, very, very important to actually reaffirm that, especially because of all of the different councils that have passed similar motions, QB, the list goes on, Senate as well. And given the fact that it's every 5 years as well, and Senate passed this exact motion that we're kind of presenting today in terms of the Be It Resolved section of divestment from weapons and then human rights. But that's a really good question. And kind of the purpose as to why we're bringing it now is because of the responsible investment draft, but otherwise it would have to be reaffirmed every single year.
Thank you.
Councillor Bose.
Thank you. Councillor Bobkowitz's question is a great segue to my question. My question was that, so given that this nature of motion, when we're stating an advocacy position, if it has to be renewed every year, I was just curious as to the timing. Why have we waited until the last month of our term as a council? So this advocacy position will be in effect for essentially 1 month until our AGM when we're de-ratified and the new council is de-ratified, right? I'm just curious on the timing. What was the decision to bring about this motion now? Just it seems odd that right as we're about to end our term and this would need to be renewed then the next year, or am I misunderstanding? What's the motivation behind the timing?
I would like to defer speaking rights to Kat.
Hi, sorry, thank you for understanding my hand signals. I just need to clarify something super quick. The action items from a motion expire at the end of a council year. So give me 30 seconds. So last year's motion included like deliverables that had to be like basically done before like the council cycle was done, like the survey that was proposed and things like that. The USC has its own like principles. So like on a principles basis, this is like a reaffirmation of a principle that doesn't necessarily expire. But given that the motion last year had like specific directives in terms of like running the survey, which I think was referred to like on the slide previous, I think that, does that provide like a little bit more context? So the stance necessarily doesn't expire unless like next year's council. So to Oliver's point, next year's council, literally at the next meeting could be like, actually this is not our stance anymore, and that would change the like stance of the organization. But unless a specific clock is put on like, we hold this principle to be true until May 26th, 2026 or something like that, the stance doesn't necessarily expire. The reason why expiry was discussed last time is because there were specific direction, like action items directed to be completed in a certain year. Does that make sense? Okay, great.
If you haven't asked a question and would like to now ask a question, please raise your placard.
Can I also speak to the question a little?
Oh, yes, of course.
Just to also answer it a little bit more, why we wanted to do it now is, again, to give a little bit more of a backup to the USC stance and really push for the stance that we are for ethical investments and reviewing that. And as the Board of Governance meetings coming up, I feel like it's important to have that motion passed. Even if it is late, it still is something that backs that up.
If you haven't asked a question, would like to ask a question, please raise your placard. Councillor Levy.
Am I on? Oh, I am on. Perfect. Less a question, more just a comment on this. I do want to speak to just the courage that it took the both of you to put this motion forward to council, especially knowing how many organizations under the auspices of the USC came out in support of this. I think it is appreciated that this motion is coming forward, especially through the way that it navigated its way through governance channels. I think the fact that it is here before us indicates that there is some will to have this move forward through in some capacity. I suppose that would be what I would want to say for this, but just to both of you, I think there is a will for this, so I appreciate you having brought it forward.
Thank you, Reagan.
Councillor Thompson.
Kat was just mentioning that last year's motion had specific action items, and I was just wondering why there's no action items on this one.
There's not exactly 4 action items. It is, again, just to reaffirm our stance, and so that USC representatives at the Board of Governance meeting can, again, advocate for students for what students are asking for, as seen by the survey, and also how many organizations and faculties have motion for this.
Just to add on to that before Dylan's next question, or Mr. Thompson, sorry. Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. Okay. So, yes, it is to reaffirm, I don't know why all my typing is. It is to reaffirm the stance, but then there are also some action items, so to actually communicate that stance in light of the policy that's coming out. So, different USC execs will have the opportunity to actually provide their thoughts on the policy and things like that, and then also at the Board of Governors meeting as well. So that is the action item for this motion. So it's to reaffirm that stance, which doesn't currently exist, and also to the action item to communicate, and then I'll defer my speaking rights to Kat to add on to that.
Councillor Thompson. I was just going to add that myself and the rest of the executive have done some consultations on Western's responsible investment policy, which is coming forward. I organized like an executive session, so like with Western's Director of Investments, the VP Operations and Finance, the Vice Provost students, who were kind of sort of the administrative leads on the policy in terms of like its communication and its consultation. So we participated in an executive-led or an executive administration session on that, where we shared our views on this policy and highlighted some of the concerns that students have, especially around the subject matter that Chahat and Zara and Sarwa have brought forward today. I also talked about it at a Senate meeting, I believe, in the fall, which would have been either the November or the December Senate meeting, publicly talking about the USC's approach to this work and the kind of feedback we're hearing from students. We also regularly meet with, the president, the vice provost, and the VP students. I kind of mentioned that in my council report as well, and have been communicating student feedback on the policies and the issue of responsible investment and divestment on campus since my term began. So should council pass this motion, we would continue to do that work up until the end of our terms, and then pass along any kind of conversations to Steve's team to continue as the 2026-2027 council sees fit.
Before I give you a second opportunity to ask a question, if there's anyone who has not asked a question and wishes to, please raise your placard. Councillor Wasti.
say I appreciate this motion, but I just have a question of, since we have reaffirmed it, we're reaffirming it this year, has there any been thought of just having it, I guess, a clause or something to have this motion be, I guess, reoccurring? You just reaffirm it every year.
I'm not sure we're able to put that clause in. I think it is up to incoming teams. We would like to defer speaking rights to Kat.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, like, because it's a stance and they have not attached an expiry, it wouldn't necessarily expire. Next year's council is welcome to bring the motion back again, kind of in the form that Zara Sarwa and Chahat have done, if they feel that a reaffirmance is necessary. I know that the councillors who presented the motion kind of talked about the idea of, looking at this as Western looks at it on a 5-year basis. So if no one ever touched this next year, it would still be the organization's stance because they haven't added like any kind of like time-bound clause to it. But if you're on council next year, you'd be more than welcome to bring it forward again for discussion if you'd like.
Before I give a second opportunity to ask a question, if there's anyone who has not asked a question and wishes to, please raise your placard. If there's anyone who has asked a question and would like to ask a second question, please raise your placard. Councillor Bobkowicz.
Hello again. This is more just a confirmation regarding the motion overall. So we're voting on the principle. We're not voting on deliverables, correct?
Sort of both. So, perfect. Yeah, the beat resolved is there. So you were voting on our commitments to the principle, and then the second portion is then to communicate these principles. So the communicate portion would be the action item, but otherwise it would just be, oh wow, okay. This is ASMR, sorry. Otherwise it would just be the reaffirming its commitment. So that's kind of the action item. But actually, now I'm wondering, maybe I'll ask Kat and defer my speaking rights. Would that action item then also be continued on year by year?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's an organizational priority to communicate the views of students in the stances. So, like, you wouldn't necessarily have to explicitly indicate every year that, like, we should be doing our jobs, but it's your job as council to hold us accountable. So you can definitely do that. And in terms of, like, the communication of the positions to university administration, that's been kind of the approach for the year, and will continue to be done so. Council imbues the executive and the president with the authority to decide organizational advocacy tactics, as we see fit. And so that would continue through the remainder of my term and into Steve's term next year.
So I suppose it's essentially more so the principle than an action item.
Okay. And if I may just follow off of that, can I? Armand?
Council would have to motion to extend question period after. My apologies.
I appreciate both of your answers. Thank you.
Councillor Lovey.
Just sort of on that, I do understand correctly, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the sort of the ethos behind this motion is the upcoming Board of Governors meeting to have a principled stance in that. So as I understand this, this is sort of a hortative motion. This is to express the will of council towards the executive, and I'm sort of looking at Kat, if this is, I'm nodding correctly, that this is an expression from council towards the executive about recommendations for actions taken or a stance.
Do I answer this? It was directed
I
at
defer my
you.
speaking rights.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll
Thank
defer
you.
them back in a second. I mean, it depends on the way that you read it, I guess. Like, a communication of an organizational stance, like, is kind of the gig that we signed up for. We sort of signed up to advocate for students. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it is like the will of council directing the executive, but more like the will of the students that you represent as constituency representatives. So if this is the view that's coming out of the constituents for councillors Nadim, Khan, and Gumen, we would continue to do our, like, if that's what you're asking, like, we would continue to do our jobs. This is an organizational stance that has existed prior to the start of my executive term. It was topic of discussion while I was being elected as president. It's part of the mandate that I was elected on. And so as an executive, we continue to advocate to Western where possible and where there's the opportunity to do so on students' views around the way that the university invests its dollars. And it's become increasingly clear over the last number of years that that is something that students are really paying attention to and really care about. And so I can say with confidence that I would continue to do that work throughout the rest of my term. And at that point, it would be passed along to Steve and the 2026-2027 Council to do as their students see fit.
Thank you.
We're back? Question mark?
Yeah, nothing more to add.
Councillor Thompson.
I understand the argument that the reason why there's not an actionable item on the motion is because the executive takes it upon themselves to perform the advocacy during private discussions with senior admin. However, if that is the point, if the point is that the executive does it within communications with admin, then there isn't a reason to have this motion. Like if the whole point is to have a principled stance, but the executive is the one that has those conversations with the execs, then there's no point to have a principled stance from the USC without action items. So my question to you is, do you think it would be better for the effectiveness of our time in the USC to add action items such as a publicized campaign run by the USC attached to this motion, just so the motion isn't futile? Because it's clear that the advocacy part is already something that is the objective of the executive. So if it's within the executive, there's not much point to have a motion passed by this council if it is something that's done by the executive, if it doesn't have additional advocacy goals.
I would like to defer speaking.
I'll just wait. I'll say one thing before deferring to Kat. So yes, absolutely, and I'm sure Kat will touch on this as well. But yes, it is up to the USC and the execs to advocate, but this is, like, the principles themselves is dependent. Like, we can't necessarily rely on the execs to decide which principles they want to or not. Okay. Let me finish. I'll finish, and then I'll defer to you. Regardless of whoever the exec is, it's more so we want the USC to have this continuing on for years to come, and it's not really up to the execs to kind of, like, this is something that we decided is within our mandate as counselors to actually choose, okay, what are the things that are valuable to us? And regardless of who the execs are year to year, this is something that would stay on. And then I'll defer my speaking rights to Kat to add on.
Advocacy strategy, I motion to move it in camera.
Okay.
I'm going to move for a 2-minute recess to figure it out real quick. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Lovey, are there any objections? We will return at 8:21 p.m.
You should have turned to me and went like this.
Thanks a bit more, sorry.
It's 8:15.
I love that. I do.
The time is now 8:26 p.m. I call this meeting back to order. Council, if you'd like to go in camera, can I get a mover? President Henriquez, can I get a seconder? Councillor Bose. Are there any questions about the in-camera session? Are there any objections? The time is 8:26 p.m. We are now in camera. The time is now 9:47 p.m. I call this meeting back to order. We are now out of camera, and we will start question period again out of camera. If you have any questions, please raise your placards. Seeing there are no questions, if you have any amendments to the motion, please raise your placards. I see Councillor Gooman and Councillor Logaswaran. If anyone else has an amendment, please raise your placard. Councillor Gooman, you may begin.
Hi. Motion to add an amendment for, would it be an action or be it further resolved? For an action item to be in place to have a post up within the next few days. 5 days? Within the next 6 days, sorry, long couple of minutes. Reinstating, give me 1 second to think. I'm so sorry. Motion to add an action item to have a post posted on the social media for USC social media saying that the USC Student Council has passed a motion to reinstate our stance, sorry.
Can you put the amendment in writing? Send it to me, and then I'll send it to the Slack, and then council can review it, and then we'll continue.
Absolutely. Is it okay if it's not exactly what I just said?
Yeah, whatever's in writing. Whatever's in writing will be what it is. Councillor Guman's amendment is in the general meetings tab on Slack. She wants it at the very end of the motion, so the last be it resolved. All right, now that you've all had time to look at the amendment, we are now only strictly talking about this amendment. Are there any questions to the amendment? I'll read it out. It is, so at the end of this motion, be it further resolved that the USC will upload a graphic on the Western USC Instagram stating that the USC reaffirms their stance on USC advocacy for divestment and human rights in Western's responsible investing policy prior to April 28th, 2026. Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Are there any amendments regarding the amendment? Are there any points of debate regarding the amendment? Are there any objections regarding the amendment? Can I get a seconder for the amendment, please? Councillor Bobkowicz. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your placard. You may lower your placards. All against the amendment, please raise your placard. And all abstaining, please raise your placard. The amendment passes. Councillor Lugswaran will now move on to your amendment.
Hi there. It's a really quick amendment. It's just that I noticed that in the motion with the whereas statement, like all the faculties are passed parallel motions advocating for the adoption of the human rights motion. I also included engineering because we did have this discussion back in November, and it did successfully pass. The UES has posted an official statement in their support of the human rights divestment motion. Just wanted to add that in.
The amendment is in the general meetings tab on Slack. Councillor Bobkowicz. So this is on the fifth line of the motion. It reads, whereas the faculties of science, engineering, social science, music, arts and humanities, and health sciences, as well as Huron and Kings, have passed parallel motions advocating for the adoption of human rights considerations in the 2025-2026 school year. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Bobkowicz. Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Councillor Guman.
If there's any other faculty or affiliate that we haven't listed, please do let us know.
Are there any other questions to the amendment? Are there any amendments to the amendment? Councillor Guman.
Just that the comma after arts be removed, as arts and humanities is one faculty.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Lovey. Are there any questions towards the amendment of the amendment? Are there any amendments to the amendment of the amendment? Are there any points of debate to the amendment of the amendment? And are there any objections to the amendment of the amendment of, yeah. All in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please raise your placard. Okay, you may lower your placards. All against, please raise your placards. And all abstaining, please raise your placards. The amendment to the amendment passes. Are there any more amendments to the amendment? Are there any points of debate to the amended amendment? Are there any objections? All in favor of Councillor Logaswaran's amendment, please raise your placard. Councillor Thompson, is that a... You may lower your placards. All against, please raise your placards. And all abstaining, please raise your placards. The amendment passes. Are there any other amendments to the motion? Are there any points of debate to the motion? Are there any objections to the motion? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote on the amended motion. Councillor Xia. I defer my speaking rights to Dane. Councillor Logasorin.
I hate to be that person. I just noticed that the dashes aren't inconsistent. But I already updated it in the Google Doc, so it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to point out that there's an M dash and then there was a regular dash, and that really bugged me. So I did change it. Sorry, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. The motion passes. Moving on to motion number 5, the motion to endorse the accessibility position paper draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities. The motion reads, be it resolved that Council endorse the student accessibility draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities to guide USC advocacy efforts. Be it further resolved that this endorsement does not constitute approval of an advocacy paper for or standing policy under the advocacy papers policy. Be it further resolved that this endorsement shall expire at September 2026 council meeting, at which time the recommendations must be reviewed, formalized through the advocacy papers process or lapse. President Henriquez is the mover. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Turk. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? And are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. Moving on to motion number 6, the motion to approve federal budget recommendations. The motion reads, whereas the federal government has advanced its budget timeline requiring submissions by April 30th, and whereas this change reduces the time available for USC submissions, be it resolved that the USC acknowledges the revised federal budget deadline and supports the necessary adjustments to internal processes to meet this timeline. Be it further resolved that the appropriate USC executive members and staff be authorized to finalize and submit the required materials by April 30th. President Henriquez is the mover. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Wasti. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments? President Henriquez.
Amend to include a 4th recommendation. I defer my speaking rights to Vice President Syed.
Yeah, so between the External Affairs Standing Committee and like 2 days ago, we had asked for recommendation 4, which was originally about the integrated transit funding from the federal government. We asked the city about their federal budget submission and whether it was in line with theirs and if it was relevant to like their current advocacy and where that issue is at. And basically what they told us is that the cut to that $5 billion in funding wasn't like confirmed yet. They were still kind of talking it out with the federal government, and that their like higher priority ask, which would actually be more important for them, was for dedicated funding for the North Bus Rapid Transit line, which for students as well, we believe is a higher priority. So we're just kind of swapping out that fourth recommendation to include the $100 million in funding to cover 1/3 of the costs to construct the City of London's Rapid Transit North route. So just kind of swapping out that fourth recommendation. Technically, all four of these recommendations are in line with recommendations in pre-existing policy papers, but we're just bringing these to you folks, A, so you can have eyes on them and give feedback on them, and B, because that fourth recommendation in our policy paper is directed at the City of London, but we're just redirecting the City of London's ask to the federal government. So it's kind of a slight modification to what's in our policy paper, but very much in line with the spirit. But yeah.
Can I get it in writing so I can post it?
Yeah, Dane has it.
Can I get a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Wasti? Are there any questions regarding the amendment? Are there any amendments to the amendment? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? All in favor of the amendment, please raise your placard. You may lower your placards. All against the amendment, please raise your placards. And all abstaining, please raise your placards. The amendment passes. Are there any more amendments to the motion? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. Moving on to motion number 7. The motion to endorse the teaching, learning, and assessment draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities. The motion reads, be it resolved that Council endorse the teaching, learning, and assessment draft recommendations as interim advocacy priorities to guide USC advocacy efforts. Be it further resolved that this endorsement does not constitute approval of an advocacy paper or standing policy under the advocacy papers policy. Be it further resolved that this endorsement shall expire at September 2026 council meeting, at which time the recommendations must be reviewed, formalized through the advocacy papers process or lapse. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Lovey? Are there any questions to the motion? Are there any amendments? Henriquez.
No, you're right. It is teaching, learning, and assessment. You just need to update the motion title. It should read motion to endorse the teaching, learning, and assessment position paper draft recommendations as interim advocacy part. It says accessibility there. It needs to be TLA. Okay, then it's fine. No worries. In the agenda, it says motion to endorse the TLA draft recommendations. Yeah, you're fine, Armand.
Are there any other amendments? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Please head over to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. If there's any questions and comments from the Western community, please raise your hand. If there's any new business items, please raise your placard. President Henriquez.
First of all, I have to say it has been such a joy to be on council with you folks this year, especially this meeting. I know it was a long one. I know we're in exams. I know it's stressful, but the fact that you remain steadfast in your commitment to students means a ton to your constituents, means a ton to people watching, and definitely means a ton to me. So I won't be like, give yourselves a round of applause for democracy, but like, give yourself a little pat on the shoulder. Like, you guys did good work tonight. New business item is supposed to be time sensitive, and this is. I am in the process for a pretty exciting new job opportunity post USC, which I'm excited to share more about soon, but it potentially means a pretty sudden relocation for me. So I have vacations saved up in the case that I would need to do so, and just be essentially, I would still be reachable, but I would just be like virtual if I needed to go for kind of like the May-ish portion, probably second week of May portion of my term. All that to say is because this is our last council meeting, I wanted to be like proactive and responsible with you folks to make sure that you know that there's like a plan should I like have to step away with a couple of days left on the calendar for this new job. So I sent Armand a motion that just to ensure that you folks can sleep soundly at night, that the advocacy and the management of the organization is kind of covered. It's kind of an honor to present this, but this is also like a if it happens kind of motion. So you're sort of voting on something in the case that it happens proactively, but just be it resolved in the event of an absence of the outgoing president, the incoming president should provide day-to-day supervision and support for the COO and outgoing VPs for May 2026.
I approve it. Can I get a seconder to the motion? Councillor Bose.
Steve really wants to be in charge. He's seconding this guy.
If there's any objections to this being a new business item, please raise your placard. Okay, it passes as a new business item. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any amendments? Are there any points of debate? And are there any objections? Councillor Lovey? All in favor of the motion, please raise your placard. You may lower your placards. All against, please raise your placard. All abstaining, please raise your placard. A reminder, AGM will be on Zoom on May 6th. Attendance is mandatory, and I will send an email with the time of the meeting. I motion to terminate. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Xia. Are there any objections? Please raise your placard. The time is 10:19 p.m. This meeting is terminated.
Keep your placards. You can take them off.
You guys can all keep your placards.